This is another prerequisite to ground driving that I really like to work on, and it's helpful for lots of different things. But I have these little plastic, they're kind of like cones, they're like boundary markers for soccer. They're super cheap, super light, and you're not going to find them a lot of places, which is why I like them. Road cones tend to be lots of places you may or may not want your horse to go towards, so I don't really like to use those. They're bright yellow because that's a color that horses see relatively easily. And Wells has used these before, but not in this setup right here. So I'm just rewarding him for touching them with his nose, and then I have a little triangle pattern set up in this area. I like doing a triangle or a square rather than just like two to go back and forth, because sometimes turning all the way back around to walk back to the first one can be a little bit challenging in a small space. So I have a little triangle, and basically what I'm asking him to do is to go from one target to another one. Early on, I don't really care which one he goes towards, and I'm marking and reinforcing at first. When he gets to the target, he doesn't physically have to touch it, but I'm kind of rewarding the intention of reaching down towards it with his nose. If you don't want them to be reaching down, you can find something taller, more like a road cone, or I've seen people take cones and stick a target stick down in them so the target stick is sticking up. That's another option. But once the horses are used to these, they often just go to them and don't feel like they have to reach their nose down towards them. So you can make that decision what works best for you and for your horse, but this works great for me, and they're lightweight, cheap, and easy to use. So if my horse is really struggling, I would get out my handheld target, which they use a lot, and kind of use those to lead them from target to target. I'm not doing that here. I'm kind of using my hand to point, and you'll notice again, we talk about distance, duration, distraction. I am keeping my distance fairly close to him and kind of helping him figure out where I want him to go, because he has done this, but he loses his confidence really quickly if he doesn't feel like he's got the right answer. I got him about a year ago, year and a half, and I don't think he was treated very kindly, and if he didn't know the right answer, I have a feeling he got in big trouble for that. So I try to really help him out. So here I'm trying to get him to turn back around and kind of go the other direction, and I got kind of half a turn, which is great. That's kind of relying on the earlier video with the steering without reins. And again, I'm kind of going up and down the scales of adding duration, distraction, distance, and also raising and lowering my criteria. I'm not super picky about which target he goes to. I'm just wanting to get some movement and that intention of going towards the target. So he seems to get a little confused right here, and I'm kind of stuck in the corner, so I'm going to try to help him figure out where I want him to go. So here I'm kind of trying to point to him, but again, I'm kind of stuck in the corner. So now I'm going to walk over to it and make it really obvious, just to build his confidence back up. So again, that's me. I'm lowering that criteria, adding a few more clues in there for him, and now he's kind of focused on me, which is fine. He just needs some training wheels a little bit more. So once they get really confident going from target to target, I will, and you'll see this with Finnick, I will start to skip targets by saying keep going, and that's one way that I'll build duration. The reason that I like the targets for ground driving is because it gives the horse something to focus on and walk towards when you are behind them. or if you're riding too, horses often get, when they're so used to seeing you in front of them or seeing a target stick in front of them to know where to go, they really rely on that. And then when all of that disappears, it can be a little confusing for them. And so this is a great way to get them confident with something like this. It gives them a visual to head towards instead of just relying on your steering, which they may or may not have fully learned yet. And again, this kind of helps lower pressure as well, because they can rely on following the targets instead of you having to steer them. So I felt like he was getting a little anxious and kind of done, and I was losing him a little bit. So I threw the target in his stall, thinking he would just go back in his stall where his hay is, and then he did not want to. And so I'm trying to lead him back in his stall again. And he decided not to follow me. He went to a target, which is fine. So I'm going to mark and reward that. Lead him back. Give him an option to go to a target. The lighting was kind of funny here, so I'm kind of wondering if you couldn't see that target as well, because the light coming through the barn there. Because he seemed to avoid that one and go to the other two more often. He's going back to that target, which is fine. I do leave their stalls open so they can choose to go back in their stall where they have a pile of hay if they want to disengage from this activity. For a horse that gets anxious, I like to give them a way out or a way to leave the situation. So I just grabbed the target and let him in because I wanted to end the session there, because I felt like he was getting a little confused and I was just kind of losing his attention. So I'm about to grab Finnick, and he has way more experience doing this. I started doing this long before I ever did ground driving with him, and this is kind of how I taught him to ground drive. I used these, and then I used the driving lines. And so I'm just kind of setting him up by showing him the targets, which he knows very well. And you'll see that I raise the criteria much more quickly with him, because he has a lot more reinforcement history with doing this. So I'm already standing behind him and not really giving him any clues or cues with my body. Which is kind of the goal, because we want them to be able to rely on seeing the targets rather than what we're doing if we're in a place where they can't see us, or at least can't see us well. And to start out, I was letting him choose which target he wanted to go to. And there I said, keep going. And I clicked his intention to move past that target towards the next one. I wasn't actually clicking at the target. And once they get this down really well, you don't have to click at each target or even at the target. You can kind of use the targets to create momentum. And I'll go back and reinforce it occasionally, but it's a great way to create direction and momentum, and you can click the direction if they turned and that's what you're working on, or you can click the momentum if moving forward is what you're working on. And that's one way to kind of up the criteria from there while still using the targets as a clue or a cue of where you want them to go. And so there I lost him a little bit, and so I'm clicking for attention. And there's grass right on the other side of this super low barrier. So I often lose him to grass. Directions. clicked at the one target. I can tell he wants to go towards the camera where the grass is, or where he can get to some grass. And I saw him kind of heading that way, so I clicked early. And I got closer to keep his attention by decreasing the distance between us. There, I had him skip a target and clicked at the next one. Again, I would not do this in an early session. You want the targets to be solid. And even though they are solid, he's still a little distracted and wanting to drift towards the camera. But he was very good. And I was able to draw him back in. And I'll use my visual draws, like getting in his eye line or talking more, doing anything to kind of bring his attention back to me. There's our will cue. I use that anytime I want to practice it, but also there it was kind of to regain his attention because he was kind of on autopilot there and I wanted to change directions. So I'm going to see if I can get him to go to all three. I think that was a full circle there. And there I think he's just following me, not actually going to the targets. There he went to a target and he got distracted because there was some spilled food on the ground. But I got him back. And so I clicked for attention. And asked him to continue doing what he was supposed to do. And I went ahead and clicked again because right there in front of the camera is where I tend to lose him a little bit. Looking over the other side of the barrier. I think he's getting bored. He gets bored pretty easily. So I click for coming back. And kind of clucking at him and whistling to keep his attention. And I lose him just for a second in the corner. And so I click for and bringing his attention back. So watching this is telling me I need to up the criteria faster to keep him from being bored or end the session sooner because he is just getting bored. But I'm trying really hard to get a full circle. I also like to keep a few higher value treats in my bag. He really loves carrots, so I have a few cut carrots in my bag for when he does something extra challenging. And for him, that circle was not challenging. He just lost his focus because he gets bored really fast. So anyway, this was our session on following the ground targets, and we'll catch you next time.